Hello loves, in today's video I'm going to be going through how to prep the skin before you apply makeup. So makeup prep is a really important step and it's often one that I think gets missed, or sometimes people kind of misunderstand when they think about skincare. A lot of the problems with makeup application and makeup longevity can actually be fixed with quite good skin prep. So I'm going to go through today in depth with you guys how to prep the skin before applying makeup. Now these tips can be used for yourself and they can be used on clients as well. So if you are a makeup student, you can adapt these tips to help for your applications for clients also. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is make sure that the skin is clean. We could use a cleanser to remove any product, so we might want to remove any makeup that's already there, any residual makeup that remains on the skin, or even just take a little bit of micellar water or a damp wipe or cloth, something like that, to just remove the residual dirt that sits on the skin. Then what we need to do is assess what the skin needs. So I will always say to my makeup students that you need to approach this holistically. So that means adapting for the individual skin type. Now I'm not going to go through with you all the different skin types. That would be a very long and laborious video to watch. But what I'm going to do is talk you through how I assess what the skin needs. So the first thing I do is visually check. So I look for texture on the skin. Is there any visible buildup of extra skin cells, so any dryness, any flakiness or anything like that? And is there any visible oils on the skin? And that helps me assess. Once I've done that, I like to do a little check as to where the skin needs additional moisture. Now, adding moisture to the skin will always give it a more plump kind of finish, so it will always help with the makeup adhering. However, you have to be careful where you add extra moisture and what kind of moisture you add. So I like to take something like a vitamin E spray or a hydrating mist and just first of all start by spraying that over the face. Now, what this does is this gives me an opportunity to look at where the skin might need extra moisture or might not need moisture. So I will do that mist, I give it a chance to dry, and what I can do with this as an assessment is where the skin absorbs the moisture, so where the skin absorbs that hydrating mist first, so where that goes in first, that's where the skin is most in need of hydration. So those dry elements will suck that stuff straight away, and where it remains a little bit more moist and a bit more wet for longer is where the skin doesn't need as much hydration. So that's my first clue. This is a great tip for clients because often people aren't sure about what their skin's like. So once you've done asking those normal consultation questions, this just gives you a few more clues about possible oiliness or dryness on the skin. So we just give that a moment to dry down, and I can already see from looking at my own skin that I tend to be drier around the edges, and that actually in the middle it's staying quite moist, which means I already have a lot of moisture in the middle. And I know from myself that my T-zone tends to get a little bit more oily and everywhere else tends to be drier. So once I've done that, my next step then is to add moisturizer where I need it. This is the holistic approach, remember, and maybe to add something to combat oil where I need it as well. So one of the things that often people will misunderstand about skin prepping is that the kind of skin care that we do generally, so the sort of skincare we might do at night, is most likely going to be different from the skincare that we do before prepping our makeup. So a lot of the time in our skincare we'll use things like oils, or we might use like hyaluronic acid based toners and things like that. And that's lovely and great skincare, but not actually great to prep for makeup. Anything oily that we put on our skin before we're going to apply makeup is actually going to hinder the makeup adhering. Oil is kind of the enemy of makeup, so we actually want to avoid that. It's great skincare for not when we're not wearing makeup, but it's not good for when we are. Now I know where I need moisture and I possibly don't, I'm going to take a little bit of my moisturiser. I like to use a vitamin C infused moisturiser because I like to get a little bit of a glow under my foundation. And I'm just going to apply that in the areas where I can see I've been a little more dry. And it's always nice to bring that down onto the neck. And my neck gets very dry as well. I get quite dry around my hairline, and I get a little bit of dryness just around my eyebrows as well. So I like to apply that just there. Now I know, and I can see visually that that hydrating mist has actually remained in the centre of my face, and this is where I tend to get oilier. Now I want my makeup to last all day, so I'm going to combat that oily section on my face, and to do that I'm going to take a little bit of setting spray. I'm going to take a clean makeup brush. You could do this with a cotton pad, or you could do this with a sponge if you wanted to, and I'm just going to spray some setting spray on that brush, and just where I know I need that extra insurance, I'm actually just going to put a little bit of setting spray just in that area. Now, if I was very, very oily here, so if this was visibly getting oilier as we were doing the skin prep, I might want to use a toner or something that is going to kind of just strip that oil back a little bit before doing this step. But as I say again, this is a holistic. And you can already see the difference. So you can see how just adding that little bit of setting spray has actually created a barrier. So it's putting a barrier between the oil and between the foundation that's going to go on my face next. It's really important that you take the time to let any products that you put on the face dry down before you add any more moisture, okay? Another thing to remember is if you are very prone to redness, maybe you're quite prone to rosacea, or if you have a client that's very prone to redness or gets very red when the skin is touched, you want to avoid rubbing as much as possible, because the more you rub the skin, the more you're going to dilate the capillaries under the skin, so the more redness you're going to get. What you want to do instead is go for soft, simple, gentle actions all of the time. Anything rubbing, more redness. It's never good. Okay, so we've kind of let that dry down now. So we've moisturised just where we need it. We've put a little bit of our setting spray just where we need it. And now what we can do is a little bit of colour correction and concealing. Now, colour correction is something that seems to really scupper people with makeup, and I think that the habit is to over colour correct, but actually colour correcting is a very specific and nuanced technique. It needs to be the minimal amount as possible. If you put too much colour corrector on the skin, what you then have to do is fix the colour correction that you've done. So you need to make sure you're only ever colour correcting exactly where you need it and not onto the skin anywhere that it shouldn't be. I'm going to show you colour correction with a little bit of green and a little bit of coral concealer, okay? And the green is for the redness on the face and the coral is for any bluey tones. So where I've got a little bit of redness, I'm going to use that green. And where I've got some bluey tones, which tends to be in and around the eye area, most people have that. We always call it dark circles under our eyes. I'm going to use a corally tone. The reason that these tones work is because on the colour wheel, they are the opposite on the spectrum. So what that means is when you bring them together, they have a neutralising effect. You know anything about colour theory, that'll make sense to you. If you don't, just remember that green is for red and coral is for kind of bluey purpley tones. That's all you need to know, really. Now, because we want to be very careful in the amount of product we're putting on, we can dilute these colour correcting concealers with a bit of moisturiser or softening lotion, or just take the excess off, maybe on the back of our hand, something like that. I'm going to start with the green and I'm going to apply a little bit of this with a soft brush, and all I'm going to do is just tap it where I have a little bit of redness. And you should be able to see on camera that what we're getting is some very gentle neutralising of any of that red tone. I haven't got a lot of redness in my skin, but quite a lot of clients have quite a lot of redness around the cheek area here. People with rosacea as well, they get a lot of redness here. So it can be really good to just know this technique. Again, we're just being very cautious and we're only putting it where we need it. You see quite a lot of people use too much green product and then they've got the job of getting that green product covered with like a foundation, and what you're doing then is, instead of actually making your job easier, you're making it harder because you're not giving yourself a second bit of work to do. Now I've got a little breakout here on the side of my face, so I've got a couple of little blemishes, so we're going to take our green concealer, we're just going to tap that just where we need it. And if you've applied too much product, just take your finger and the warmth of your finger will help to distribute it. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same with our coral concealer on a small brush. This also works well with yellow. So if you have a very yellowy concealer, this works quite nicely under the eye area. And you can see that this just lifts and neutralises that bluey tone. We're just pressing that in very carefully. The skin around your eye is incredibly delicate, so you have to be very careful with it. If you're likely to be too heavy-handed with your brush, just switch to your ring finger and just gently press the product in. And you can see I'm using such a small amount. Now, if you're working with a client, you might notice at this point that all of that skincare has been absorbed and has gone into the skin, and this is where any problem areas will start to show themselves. So if somebody's really, really oily, that oil will now be starting to come through again, so you can counteract that again with a bit more setting spray, or maybe even with a little bit of translucent powder. Or if somebody's very dry, some dry areas might now be coming through, we can get our moisturiser back again and start to apply that again, because we haven't done any foundation yet. If you have a client that has extremely dry areas on their skin, so you've done that first round of moisturiser and it's just really not hitting, one thing that you could do is take a little bit of your moisturiser on a cotton pad, like a cotton disc, place that on, and I often get this with clients, particularly in the winter time, who get a lot of dryness around their nose. Before we apply their foundation, I get a bit of the moisturiser on a cotton disc and I will just place it on the area and just leave it there for a few moments. Okay, while I'm doing other things, maybe I'm colour correcting or whatever. That just gives the moisturiser a time to really bed in and seep in, and then I can take off the excess with those little cotton discs when I remove it. That works quite well. That's quite a nice top tip. Okay, so now you can move on to a primer. So if you are worried about being oily and wanting to really add an insurance layer to the skin before you apply your foundation, you could apply a mattifying primer. I'm going to just do a little bit of that again in this area that I know I get oily. Alternatively, you could apply a moisturising primer if you're prone to dryness in that area. What you don't want to do is make the mistake of just taking one primer and putting it all over the face. You can only really do that if you have a normal skin type, if you don't have any variation in your skin type. I mean, you can see the difference that makes already. I'm just going to take a little bit more of this because I can see that right in the centre there is going to get a little bit oily. And it's not essential to go into this much detail every time you do your makeup. You know, of course, Sometimes we just want to whack our makeup on and get out the door. But if you're doing something, going to an event, or you need it to last a long time, then you want to maximize the adhesion. You want to maximize the makeup's opportunity to last as long as possible. And obviously for your clients, that's super important as well. Okay, so now we've got a nice even base. Everything's kind of leveled out. We've got moisture where we need it. We've got extra insurance for where we might get oily. We can start applying our foundation.